The halls of the Red Keep were unusually silent. A storm brewed outside, the skies matching the mood of Westeros, as news of King Robert Baratheon's death crept through the stone corridors. Ned Stark stood by the window of his borrowed chamber, looking over King's Landing with the heavy weight of honor sitting sharp on his shoulders. He had trusted the old king, even if Robert had long since drowned in wine and women. But the children, Ned clenched his jaw, they were not Robert's. That boy Joffrey, cruel to the bone, was no more Robert's son than Ned was a Lannister. And now that boy was about to sit the Iron Throne. The parchment in his hand, sealed, and signed by a dying king, named Ned as protector of the realm, until the rightful heir came of age. But what did paper matter when the Queen had already torn it apart with her lies? Cersei Lannister's smug face still echoed in his mind. "You're just not made for this, are you?" she had whispered. "You wear your honor like a coat of armor, Stark, but armor gets heavy." Ned closed his eyes. Honor, duty, justice, all meaningless when the game was rigged with vipers and snakes. He had a choice, one he had never thought himself capable of making, yet here he was, considering it. What if he stopped the rot before it spread? What if he ended Joffrey before that vile crown could touch his head? Outside, the city whispered and watched. Varys had warned him. Littlefinger had manipulated him, and the Queen had threatened him. But none of them had considered this. What if the wolf struck first? That night, Ned moved through the Red Keep like a ghost, wrapped in black, cloaked. In silence, Ser Barristan was not at his post. A favor called in. 2 loyal men from the north, swords sharpened and hearts ready, flanked him quietly. They did not know the plan, only that their lord had asked them to trust him. Joffrey's chambers were guarded, but not heavily. No one expected anything from the honorable Ned Stark. He was no assassin, no usurper. But that night he became both. The young prince was asleep, curled in silks and velvet, snoring like a spoiled pup. A lion cub in his den, dreaming cruel dreams of power. Ned hesitated, staring down at the boy's soft golden curls, so like his mother's. He saw Bran in that innocent sleep. He saw Robb when he was younger. But he also saw Sansa's tears when Joffrey had her direwolf killed. He saw Arya's face when Mycah was slaughtered like an animal. And he saw the blood that would flood the realm if this boy sat the throne. The dagger was quiet, clean, quick. A single gasp escaped the boy's lips as his eyes opened wide in fear and confusion, and then nothing. Joffrey Baratheon was dead before he could scream. Ned stood there, heart pounding in his ears, breath shallow. It was done. Gods forgive him, it was done. He turned to his men. "No word of this, not yet. We leave now." In the days that followed, the realm turned upside down. Cersei's scream echoed through the halls when she found her son's cold body. The gold cloaks searched frantically for a killer. Varys raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Littlefinger smiled like a man who knew more than he let on. And Ned? He walked into the throne room not as a hand, but as a man ready to take the pieces and shift the game. "I have proof the boy was not the rightful heir," he told the small council. "King Robert named me protector of the realm until the true heir, Stannis Baratheon, takes the throne. There was no King Joffrey to defy him now, no boy to rally behind, only a grieving queen, a nervous court, and a nation balanced on the edge of war. But killing Joffrey hadn't stopped the bloodshed. It had only begun it. The mood in King's Landing turned cold despite the sun's heavy glare over the Red Keep. Joffrey's death, though hushed in whispers and softened with lies of sickness, spread like wildfire beneath the surface. The court knew, the nobles knew, the streets buzzed with theories and suspicions, but none dared say the name they were all thinking: Ned Stark. Cersei Lannister did not mourn quietly. Her wails had rattled the very foundation of the Red Keep. She smashed goblets, overturned tables, and slapped anyone who dared speak in calming tones. But beneath her fury was something colder, deadlier. She was already planning, already scheming. The lioness had lost her cub, and she wanted blood. "I will not sit in silence," she hissed through clenched teeth in the council chambers. "My son was murdered in his bed, and no one dares speak of justice." Ned sat at the far end of the long oak table, flanked by Ser Davos and Grand Maester Pycelle. The others, Varys, Peter Baelish, Renly Baratheon, watched the storm unfold. "There will be justice," Ned said, his voice even, "but first the realm must have clarity. King Robert's true heir is Stannis Baratheon, a man of law and blood." "You mean to hand the throne to a cold-blooded zealot?" Renly snapped. "You'd trade one child's death for 1,000 under Stannis's rule." "The realm needs stability," Ned replied, calm as still water. "Not another boy propped up on a throne by lies." Cersei's eyes never left Ned. "And what of Sansa?" she asked softly. "Your daughter, still betrothed to the king." "Oh, wait, there is no king anymore, is there?" A silence fell over the chamber. It was no longer a veiled threat. It was a dagger glinting in daylight. "She is not your pawn," Ned said, cold now. Cersei smiled, and it was the cruelest thing he had ever seen. "Everything is a pawn, Lord Stark, even daughters, especially daughters." That night, Ned visited Sansa. She was quiet, too quiet. Her eyes were hollowed out, her hands trembling, even though the room was warm. "He's dead, isn't he?" she asked, voice almost a whisper. Ned sat beside her, brushing a strand of auburn hair from her cheek. "Yes, he is." Sansa didn't cry. That stunned him. She just looked down, at her hands. "Does that mean I won't be queen?" He flinched. "No, sweet girl, you won't be queen." A strange look crossed her face then, part relief, part heartbreak. "I didn't want him to die." Ned sighed. "Neither did I. But it was the only way to stop the rot before it spread. He would have been a monster on that throne." "You saw it too." "I saw it," she whispered. "He liked to hurt people." They sat in silence a while. Then she asked, almost shyly, "Are we going home?" Ned looked away. "I don't know," he admitted. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the city, things were moving. Gold cloaks loyal to the Lannisters began gathering in secret. Littlefinger whispered in too many ears. Varys slipped messages to unknown agents through tunnels that no one dared map. And in the docks of King's Landing, a raven flew east to Dragonstone. Lord Stannis read the letter twice, then burned it in the fire. "So," he muttered, eyes glowing with firelight, "Ned Stark did what I should have done." On the 4th day after Joffrey's death, Cersei made her move. It began with a scream from the Tower of the Hand. One of Ned's northern guards, slain. A second, missing. Ned was in the courtyard when it happened. He heard the clang of swords, the gallop of boots. Sansa's room had been stormed, but she was gone, vanished. Cersei's voice rang from the throne room, loud enough to pierce. "Stone. Lord Eddard Stark has committed treason. He murdered my son, and he dares to crown Stannis Baratheon over my Tommen." She dragged the boy into the room. Tommen, innocent and shaking, barely a whisper of a king, crownless, confused, and clutching his mother's hand. "The throne is his by blood," she declared. Ned arrived with his sword drawn, surrounded by only a handful of loyal men. "He is not Robert's son. Neither was Joffrey, and yet he was king," Cersei screamed. "You've destroyed my family, Stark. I will destroy yours." From behind her, 2 Kingsguard knights stepped forward. Sir Meryn Trant, Sir Boros Blount, loyal only to power. "You would start a war to hold on to a lie?" Ned said. She smiled through her tears. "I didn't start this war, you did, the night you put a blade in my son's heart." The throne room was a battlefield of silence. The weight of what had just been said, shouted, hung heavier than iron. Every knight, every lord, every whispering servant watching from the shadows knew that there was no going back now. Ned Stark had killed the Queen's son. The Queen had kidnapped his daughter, and both were now claiming legitimacy over the Iron Throne in the name of two different boys. One a bastard in truth, the other a rightful heir no one wanted. Ned's hand tightened on the hilt of ice. "I will not kneel to a lie," he said, his voice echoing off the vaulted walls. "You've made this a den of vipers, Cersei. I will not let my daughter be another victim of your madness." Tommen clung to his mother's skirts, looking up at Ned with tearful eyes. "Is it true?" the boy whispered, barely audible over the tension in the room. "Was Joffrey not the king?" Cersei grabbed him by the shoulder and shoved him behind her like a shield. "Enough! Take him to his chambers. Lock the doors. Anyone loyal to House Lannister, you will defend your queen. The rest of you." She let the threat hang. The gold cloak stood still. All eyes turned to Janos Slynt, their commander. He licked his lips nervously, uncertain which way the wind blew, and then, without a word, Sir Barristan Selmy stepped forward. He removed his white cloak. "I served 3 kings, 2 just, 1 mad. I will not serve a false queen." The gasp that followed was like the draw of 1,000 arrows. Cersei hissed, "You dare?" "I dare to honor my oath," Selmy said, "and I will see your lies buried, my queen." Swords clashed before the silence could return. The throne room erupted in chaos. Steel sang, screams rose, and blood spilled onto the marble floor as battle broke loose between the Queen's loyalists and Ned's outnumbered but determined men. Selmy fought like a man half his age, his white armor streaked with blood. Sir Meryn Trant moved to strike him down, but ice caught his blade mid-swing and split his sword in 2. "Go!" Selmy barked at Ned. "Find your daughter. End this." Ned hesitated, but only for a moment. He and 2 of his remaining men pushed through a side corridor toward Maegor's holdfast, where he suspected Cersei had hidden Sansa. Every step was met with a new challenge. Lannister guards, panicked courtiers, fire in the halls as someone, somewhere, had set part of the Red Keep alight. The city outside was no better. Riots had begun. The small folk didn't know the details, just that one king was dead, another boy now claimed the throne, and there was no food in the markets. Chaos was the perfect soil for rebellion, and someone, maybe Varys, maybe Littlefinger, had been sowing that seed from the shadows. Ned found her in the Sept of Baelor. She wasn't crying, she wasn't even afraid. Sansa sat before the statue of the mother, eyes red but dry, her dress torn, her hair tangled. "She said she would send me away," she said quietly when Ned approached, "to Casterly Rock, as a ward, like a prisoner with nice curtains." Ned crouched in front of her, breathing hard. "Come, now." She looked at him. "Will she kill me?" "No," Ned lied, "not if I have you." They didn't make it far before Cersei found them. She stood at the top of the stairs, flanked by a dozen guards. Behind her, Tyrion Lannister appeared, expression unreadable, eyes darting between his sister and Ned. "Surrender," she said softly, "and the girl lives." "You don't have the power to make that promise," Ned shot back, "and I don't have the weakness to believe it." Cersei's eyes blazed. "Then we're done playing games." But Tyrion stepped forward before her command could come. "You'll start a war," he said, arms open like a man tired of everyone's stupidity. "A war you'll lose. Let him go. Let the girl go. Then fight your battle with words, not fire, or do you want the streets running red before sunset?" "I want justice," she snarled. "No," Tyrion said. "You want revenge. Justice is something else entirely." Ned used the moment to move. He shoved Sansa behind him, grabbed a fallen torch and swung it at the draperies lining the wall. Fire erupted instantly, the old silks hungry for flame. Screams rang out as the smoke began to spread, and in the confusion, Ned and Sansa slipped away. The gates of the Red Keep loomed ahead. Freedom was just beyond them, but so were 100 blades, hungry for Stark blood. And back inside, a queen with a lion's heart was preparing to burn the realm, to get her son's vengeance. The streets of King's Landing were no longer streets. They were war zones. Fires crackled in alleys, smoke curled into the sky like black fingers choking the sun, and the air stank of sweat, blood, and fear. The riot had morphed into rebellion. The small folk, long starved and silenced, had found their voice in chaos. Ned Stark pulled Sansa through a maze of screaming merchants and overturned carts, ducking behind burning wagons and dodging looters who had no clue who he was, only that he looked important enough to rob. Sansa struggled to keep up, her thin shoes slipping on blood-slick cobblestones. "I can't," she gasped. "You can," Ned snapped, more out of desperation than cruelty. "Keep moving, just a little more." But they didn't make it to the gates. The Lannister lions had already shut them. Outside, the gold cloaks stood armored and ready, not for the protection of the people. No, they weren't here for that. They were here for one thing. "Lord Stark!" one of them called. "Drop the sword! Release the girl!" Ned turned slowly, placing himself between Sansa and the wall of steel. Behind him, the city burned. In front of him, Cersei's justice marched forward with blades drawn. "Your commander is dead," Ned called back. "Janos Slynt betrayed his vows the moment he sold his loyalty for gold. Do you still follow men like that?" There was a long pause. Then a man stepped out from behind the guards. Grey cloak, a sword wrapped in black leather, a northern accent barely concealed beneath the grime of the capital. Jory Cassell. Ned's breath caught in his throat. Jory. The man gave a small, bitter smile. "You thought I was dead? My lord, I was close, but the gods weren't done with me. I've been hiding in the sewers, waiting, listening." Ned lowered his sword an inch, stunned. "I've got 50 men outside the walls," Jory said. "Riders, archers, loyal to House Stark. I've been pulling them in quiet. We've been waiting for you to give the signal." Ned turned to Sansa. She was pale but alert, her eyes darting between her father and the soldiers. "How many of the gold cloaks will fight with us?" Ned asked. Jory shrugged. "Some will, some won't. Most will watch." Behind him, a small group of men began to peel off from the gold cloaks. Not many, maybe 10, but enough. Enough to make the others uncertain. Enough to cause hesitation. And hesitation was all Ned needed. He turned, looked up toward the walls of the Red Keep. Cersei was there, watching, standing beneath the banners of House Lannister with her golden hair tangled by the wind, her face unreadable. Their eyes met across the firelit distance. He lifted, ice in silent defiance. She didn't flinch. Then everything shattered. From the rooftops, arrows rained down. Screams burst through the crowd. Somewhere behind them, a barrel exploded. Wildfire or something worse. Ned couldn't tell. The crowd erupted in a stampede of panic. "Run!" Jory shouted. The gates opened in the chaos, and Stark riders stormed in. Blades flashing, horses bucking, cutting a path through the riot and the guards alike. Jory grabbed Sansa and flung her behind him. "Take her to the docks." Ned fought like a man possessed. Every swing of ice carved space between him and the Lannisters. One man tried to strike him from behind, but a Stark archer, gods bless him, dropped the bastard with an arrow to the throat. "Sansa!" Ned bellowed. He caught up to her as she stumbled near a burning stall. "Stay behind me!" They pushed through the chaos, step by agonizing step, until the smell of salt hit the air. The docks, finally. Boats, some burning, some stolen, rocked wildly against the piers. And there, waiting by a skiff, was Arya. She was filthy, bruised, clutching a short sword that was clearly not hers. But she was alive. "Sansa!" she cried, throwing her arms around her sister. Ned froze, overwhelmed with relief and guilt all at once. "Arya, how did you—" "Varys," she muttered, eyes wild. "He pulled me out, said you'd be coming." Ned looked to the water, looked to the boat, looked back toward the city as it burned behind him. "You get on that boat," he told Jory. "Take them to White Harbor. From there to Winterfell. Keep them safe." "And you?" Jory asked. "I'll find Robb," Ned said. "This isn't over. The North will remember." As the boat drifted from the dock, Sansa reached out one hand. "Father, come with us." But Ned only shook his head, sword clenched, face carved from stone. "I've still got a war to win," he said. The ravens flew faster than the wind, from King's Landing to River Run, to the Eyrie, to the frozen halls of Winterfell. The message was clear and cold. Lord Eddard Stark has slain Joffrey Baratheon. Cersei Lannister holds the throne. War is upon us. Atop the battlements of Winterfell, Robb Stark stood with the scroll in hand, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. The words blurred before him, though he'd read them 3 times. Maester Luwin stood, at his side, grave and silent, waiting for a response. "He did it," Robb said, voice barely a whisper. "He killed the bastard." Luwin didn't correct him. There was no space left for gentleness now. "My sisters?" Robb asked. "They escaped," Luwin confirmed. "Lord Jory took them to White Harbor. They'll be here within the week, God's willing." Robb closed his eyes, then opened them with fire inside. "Send word to every bannerman in the north. Tell them to ready arms, gather men and ride. We march for war." At River Run, the Blackfish laughed. "I always liked that Stark. Knew there was fire under that honor." Catelyn didn't laugh. She sat at the head of the war table, pale with worry. "My girls," she whispered. "Ned, what's he done?" "He struck first," Brynden said. "And if he hadn't, they would have bled us dry while smiling. You raised a man of principle, Cat, but even honor has its limits." She stood slowly. "Then we'll fight beside him. House Tully will answer the call." Meanwhile, in the golden halls of Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister read the letter with stone-faced calm. Sir Kevan stood nearby, waiting for his brother to explode. But Tywin didn't explode. He didn't speak at all for a long time. Then, finally, he folded. The letter, "Summon Jaime." Kevan blinked. "You want him to ride east, join the army?" "I want him to lead the army," Tywin said. "We'll crush the Starks before their wolves grow bold." "And if they have allies?" Kevan asked. Tywin's eyes glinted. "Then we burn them too." Back in King's Landing, Ned had not left. He remained in the city's underbelly, in the ruined shadows of Flea Bottom and the crumbling bones of the Sept of Baelor. Word had spread that he fled, but it was a lie he let grow, because now he worked in secret. He met with lords who feared the Lannisters, with whisperers, with mercenaries. He even reluctantly spoke to Varys. "Chaos is a ladder," the spider said, smiling thinly. "Littlefinger said that once. You seem to be climbing it yourself now." "I'm not climbing anything," Ned growled. "I'm building a gallows." "You'll need rope," Varys replied, "and friends. I can help provide both, if you give me what I want." "And what's that?" "Peace," Varys said almost sadly. "Not for the nobles, for the people." Ned didn't trust him, but he needed eyes and ears, and Varys had both in every wall and shadow. Together they began to stitch a rebellion, from the roots upward. The poor, the hungry, the angry, they didn't care about kings. They cared about food, coin, and safety, and Ned promised all 3, if they would rise. On the 15th day after Joffrey's death, a strange wind blew across the capital. A Lannister patrol went missing outside the Gate of the Gods. A merchant caravan loyal to the Queen was burned in the night. Someone looted the Tower of the Hand and left a single sigil in blood on the wall. A direwolf's head. Cersei raged. "She wants war. She'll have war," Ned muttered. That night he stood beneath the Red Keep's outer wall, dressed in black, cloaked in filth, watching the guards above laugh and drink. The city's defenders had grown lazy again, no longer fearing a man they thought long gone. Jory appeared at his side, blade glinting in the dark. "All the pieces are in place," he said. "You say the word, we light the city." Ned nodded slowly. "Not yet." "What are you waiting for?" Ned stared at the tower that held the Iron Throne. "I want her to feel the fear first, to know the wolves are in her walls." In a shadowed cell beneath the city, Cersei visited a prisoner. It was Littlefinger. He was bloodied, stripped, bound, but smiling. "You lost control," she hissed. "You promised the gold cloaks would be mine." He laughed, spitting blood. "You always think everyone is yours, but power doesn't work that way, my queen." She stepped forward and slapped him. "You're lucky I don't have you hanged." "You're lucky Ned didn't slit your throat while you slept," he said, smiling wider. "He's changing, you know, becoming something terrifying." Cersei's eyes narrowed. "He's still a Stark, still ruled by honor." Littlefinger shook his head. "Not anymore." Back in the north, Robb had crossed the neck. 10,000 swords marched under the Stark banners, the drums of war echoing through the haunted forests and frozen rivers. For the first time in a generation, the wolf was awake, and it was howling south. The War of the Two Kings had begun. The snow had not yet fallen, but the cold came early that year, as if the land itself sensed the blood that was coming. Robb Stark stood atop a hill near the ruins of Moat Cailin, watching his army stretch into the mist like a living river of steel. His direwolf, Grey Wind, padded silently beside him, ears twitching with every distant drumbeat of war. He was 19, yet already the North called him king, not because he claimed a crown, but because he acted like a man who no longer needed one. A raven had arrived that morning. Sansa and Arya had reached Winterfell. Safe. Robb didn't smile at the news. He didn't cry either. He simply nodded once, then turned back to the map spread across the wooden table. "We take the twins next," he said to Greatjon Umber and Rose Bolton. "Then strike down into the Riverlands. We'll break their supply lines before they even reach Harrenhal." Umber grunted. "You trust the Freys to let us cross?" Robb's jaw clenched. "No, but I'll offer terms." "And if they refuse?" "Then I'll show them what happens when you deny a wolf its path." In King's Landing, the Lannisters were scrambling. Jaime had arrived with 20,000 men, but the city could barely contain them. The cost of feeding so many was draining Cersei's coffers faster than she could count. Gold was no longer power, steel was. And her steel was cracking. The city was no longer hers. People spat at her guards. Markets refused her coin. Streets were carved with Stark sigils in chalk and blood. She sent out patrols only for them to return missing half their men. The rebellion Ned had seeded in secret had begun to flower. But she refused to flinch. Instead, she summoned the High Septon and gave him something old kings feared: power. "With your blessing," she whispered to the fat man cloaked in gold, "I will restore the gods to this city. Let the faith rise. Let the sinners burn. Let the heretics be purged." The man grinned, hands greasy with ambition. And thus the faith militant was reborn. The crown and the church, two blades forged into one, aimed straight at the heart of every enemy Cersei could not reach with gold alone. Far below, in the crypts of King's Landing, Ned Stark stood over the bones of forgotten kings. He listened to the whispers of Varys, to the reports of Jory, to the scrawled maps his spies had drawn of Lannister weak spots. "She's getting desperate," Varys said. "She's weaponized the faith. She wants to wash the city in fire and prayer." "She'll choke it with both," Ned muttered. "We have one chance," Jory said. "Strike now, while Jaime's army is spread thin in the riverlands. Cut the head off the lion while it's distracted." Ned nodded. "And the small folk?" "They'll rise if we give them a reason." "Then we give them one." At dawn it began. The bells tolled, not for mourning, but for mutiny. Flea Bottom erupted in fire and fury. Hundreds of small folk armed with blades, clubs, and stolen torches surged through the lower city. They painted the walls with lion blood, overran watchposts, and tore down banners bearing Cersei's crest. It was not an army. It was something worse. It was a starving city with nothing left to lose. And behind them, hidden in plain sight, marched Ned Stark, cloaked in black, wielding ice, with a look in his eyes that no longer belonged to the man who came south to serve a king. He was no hand now. He was the executioner. Cersei awoke to the sound of screaming. She rushed to the window and saw smoke curling from the sept. The faith militant who had promised to crush the rebellion were being dragged through the streets, stripped, burned, mocked. She spun to the door. "Where is Jaime?" A guard stumbled in, bloodied. "Your Grace, he's been ambushed near Harrenhal. The Northmen have him surrounded." Cersei's scream tore from her throat. She shoved the guard aside and rushed through the halls, barefoot, wild-eyed. By the time she reached the throne room, the doors had already been breached. Ned stood beneath the Iron Throne, surrounded by small folk holding torches and blades. Varys and Jory stood beside him. Behind them, more poured in from every corridor. Cersei froze. "You," she whispered, shaking. "You should have left when you had the chance," Ned said. "You murdered my son. You murdered the realm." She lunged for the sword of a fallen guard, shrieking, but Jory tackled her to the marble. She fought like a madwoman, biting, clawing, howling. Ned approached slowly. He looked down at her. "I offered you mercy once," he said. "You spat in my face." She spat again. He raised ice but stopped. He looked to the throne, then back to her, and turned away. "Take her to the dungeons. The people will decide her fate." Outside, the city roared. The wolf had taken Aia, the lion's den. But the war was far from over, because in the east Daenerys Targaryen had heard whispers of a rebellion in Westeros. And she was already gathering ships. Across the narrow sea, in the scorched sands of Meereen, Daenerys Targaryen stood at the top of a pyramid, a letter clutched in her hand. It wasn't addressed to her. It wasn't meant for her, but Varys had a way of making sure the right messages reached the right ears. The news was clear. Joffrey Baratheon is dead. Eddard Stark leads a rebellion. The lion bleeds. The realm fractures. She read it 3 times, then looked up at her dragons. Drogon growled low in his throat, pacing restlessly on the sun-baked stones. Rhaegal and Viserion coiled nearby, wings twitching, hungry for flight. "Now," she whispered, "now they remember the wolf." Daario Naharis leaned on a spear behind her, his usual smirk dulled by the gravity in her voice. "You plan to ride on the storm?" She turned to him. "I am the storm." Back in Westeros, Robb Stark moved like a blade through the riverlands. The Freys had opened the twins, barely, but not without demands. Walder Frey had insisted on marriage promises and tribute. Robb gave him what he wanted, for now. He didn't have the time or patience to fight on 2 fronts. He crossed the Green Fork, took the eastern banks, and drove his army straight through Lannister-held villages. Fires lit the sky every night, and the banners of the wolf hung from ruined towers. In the ruins of Darry, Robb met his uncle Edmure and laid out his plan. "We draw Tywin into the open. His pride will force him to respond." "He's already moving," Edmure warned. "They say he's pulling men from the Reach. The Tyrells are sniffing around." Robb's jaw clenched. "Let them. The more they gather, the more they bleed when we break them." And in King's Landing, the aftermath of the rebellion had left the city dazed. Cersei was in chains, locked deep in the black cells. Her golden hair had been shaved to the scalp. Her screams still echoed at night, but fewer listened now. Tommen had vanished. Some said he was taken by loyalists. Others believed he drowned in the chaos. No one could confirm. Ned searched, but the city was too fractured, too broken. The Iron Throne itself stood empty. "I won't sit on it," Ned said, standing before the jagged seat. "It's not mine to claim." "But someone must rule," Varys insisted. "The realm is bleeding, and the wolves and lions are not the only beasts circling." "I didn't fight a queen to become a king," Ned muttered. "I fought to stop rot from spreading. I won't replace it with more steel." Varys studied him quietly. "Then who?" Ned didn't answer, but the answer was already on a ship crossing the sea. Daenerys Targaryen had begun her march. Her fleet, rebuilt by the Ironborn she'd conquered, cut through the waves like knives. Her Dothraki screamed for blood. Her Unsullied stood silent, perfect, patient, and above them dragons circled like gods made flesh. In her hand she carried a second scroll, one written in a clean northern hand. "To the one they call the Mother of Dragons, the Iron Throne is broken. Westeros stands on the edge of fire and ash. If you still believe in justice, come not as a conqueror, come as a queen who listens." It was signed simply N. Stark. The message burned in her mind as they neared the coast of Dawn. Daario stood beside her on the deck. "You trust him?" "I don't need to trust him," Daenerys replied. "I need to know if he fears me. And if he doesn't?" She looked at the horizon. "Then he'll learn." By the time her ships landed, Dawn had already bent the knee. The Martells, long bitter from Ilia's murder and years of southern neglect, welcomed her like a goddess from the sea. She marched north slowly, but steadily. City after city opened its gates. Small folk lined the roads to see the dragons. Many bowed, some wept, and all across the land whispers began again. "The dragons have returned. The Targaryen girl brings fire and justice. Will she burn the wolves too?" At Harrenhal, Robb met the Lannisters in open battle for the first time. It was not a clean fight. Jaime Lannister led the vanguard himself. His golden armor flashed like a sun on the battlefield, and for a moment he was the warrior he was born to be. But the North did not fight like Southerners. They came in waves, screaming, relentless, impossible to stop. Grey wind tore through the Lannister ranks like a ghost in the fog. Robb clashed with Jaime in the mud and blood, steel ringing against steel until he had his sword at the Kingslayer's throat. "You going to kill me, boy?" Jaime sneered. "No," Robb said. "Not yet." He sent Jaime in chains to Riverrun, and with that the West began to tremble. Tywin knew the war was tipping, but he wasn't done yet. He was already writing to the Reach, already whispering to the Iron Bank, already laying traps no one could yet see. Because Tywin Lannister had lost battles before, but he had never lost a war. The sun had not yet risen when Daenerys Targaryen saw King's Landing. Her fleet stood anchored just beyond the Blackwater Bay, sails furled, dragons circling the sky like thunderclouds with wings. The city before her bore scars, burned towers, shattered walls, collapsed markets. Yet even in ruin, it held a cruel kind of beauty. She stood on the deck of her ship, wrapped in black and silver, eyes fixed on the horizon. "This is where my family fell," she whispered, "and where I will rise." Drogon let out a low growl, as if in agreement, and the deck shuddered beneath his wings as he landed beside her. The Unsullied stood in perfect ranks behind her. Dothraki scouts were already galloping across the shore. Daario joined her at the bow. Still think he'll meet you in peace?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Ned Stark would meet her, or she'd burn the city a second time. Inside the Red Keep, Ned watched her ships through a cracked tower window. The city buzzed with tension. Children whispered about dragons. Men sharpened spears with shaking hands. Nobles tried to flee in secret. The small folk prayed to every god they knew. And some, they didn't. Arya stood behind him, her face grim. Sansa sat silently nearby, her eyes no longer full of fear, but cold calculation. His daughters were not the children he once knew. "They say she has 3 dragons," Arya said. 3 monsters against a ruined city. Sansa added softly, "She won't hesitate if she thinks we stand in her way." Ned turned to them, voice low. "Then we make sure we don't." He rode out alone to meet Daenerys. No armor, no banners, just the direwolf sigil on his chest and the weight of the realm on his shoulders. She met him in the fields south of the city, surrounded by Unsullied and Dothraki, with Drogon looming just behind her like a mountain with eyes. Her silver hair gleamed in the wind. He dismounted and bowed his head slightly. "My queen," he said. She didn't return the courtesy. "You summoned me. You asked for peace. And yet I find a kingdom in ruin. You've seen what it became," Ned said evenly. "A den of vipers and liars. I killed a false king to prevent fire from consuming everything. I won't hand the ashes to another." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you calling me false? I'm asking if you came to rule or to burn." For a long moment silence stretched between them. Only the wind dared to move. Then Daenerys finally spoke. "I came to restore justice." "Then don't start with vengeance," Ned said. "Sit with me. Talk with the lords. Let the people see you as more than a dragon." She studied him. No man had ever spoken to her this way, not without fear, not without begging. He spoke not as a subject, but as an equal, and something in her shifted. 3 days later, in the throne room of King's Landing, Daenerys entered the Red Keep not as a conqueror, but as a guest. Ned stood by her side as lords from the north, the Riverlands, the Vale, and even Dorne gathered to witness what hadn't happened in generations, a peaceful transfer of power. The Iron Throne had been destroyed, melted, shattered during the rebellion, and in its place stood a simple stone seat, unadorned. Daenerys sat upon it for the first time, not as a queen of dragons, but as a queen of the people. In the months that followed, Westeros reshaped itself. The North was declared independent, with Robb Stark crowned king in Winterfell, not by ambition, but by unanimous desire. Arya disappeared into the West, taking no titles, only a blade and a direction. Sansa remained in King's Landing, serving as Daenerys' chief advisor, ice beside fire, a balance no council had ever known. Tyrion Lannister was found hiding in Essos. Daenerys brought him back, not for punishment but counsel. His guilt was punishment enough. As for Cersei, her trial came swiftly. The people voted, and the verdict was death. But Daenerys stayed, her executioner's hand. "She will rot," the queen said. "Let her live long enough to see the world built without her." Cersei never spoke again. Ned Stark returned to Winterfell one last time, walking the snow-covered halls with the ghost of the man he once was. He stood before the weirwood tree and whispered to it, "It should have ended differently. But maybe, just maybe, it ended the only way it could. With fire, yes, but not ashes. With wolves and dragons, and peace, however fragile.